If you are one of those people who are inherently drawn to horror, you're in real danger. I don't know what it is exactly. I don't pretend to know everything that's going on. And in fact, myself, I used to be drawn to the more realistic, non-supernatural creepypastas. But, well, let me explain. About a year ago, I was up at 3 a.m, you know, that part of the night when you're so deep into it feels like it will never end. Anyway, I was up, clicking around looking for a good creepypasta I hadn't read before, really getting myself freaked out. You know the feeling, I'm sure. You like the feeling. That's the problem. Anyways, I'm reading and I hear a pattering sound coming from the kitchen. I had a cat, so I just assumed it was her. But then I glance on my bed and my cat is lying there. Now, I've been freaking myself out for a while here, so I was nearly trembling with fear as I opened my bedroom door. I live alone, in a single bedroom apartment, with just a bedroom, a kitchen, a living room, and a bathroom. My bedroom door opens up into the kitchen. It was pitch black, the moonlight gleaming off the linoleum. I strained my ears and listened. I heard nothing. I admonished myself for being such a fucking pussy. It was just random house noises, right? Or maybe a fucking mouse in the walls. I was about to turn around and head back into my room when I heard it again. And I saw something scatter across the linoleum in the kitchen, headed for the bathroom. It was small, but it was definitely not a rat. The limbs were way too long. The torso was far too high off the ground. And the way it moved quickly, but so awkwardly. In any other circumstance, I might have laughed at it. As it was, I was scared shitless. So, I basically freeze there for like 10 minutes. It was the size of the thing that convinced me to move. No matter how weird or fucked up it was so much smaller than me. It couldn't have been that dangerous, right? So I grab the broom I have leaning up against the wall of the kitchen, flip on the lights, and head back down towards the bathroom. I find that with the lights on, I'm barely scared at all, More intrigued. I mean, what the fuck could that thing have been? So I pop open the bathroom door. Before I turn on the light, I do a quick scan. Nothing. I flick the switch, look around. Still nothing. I look on the ceiling fan even. I throw the shower curtain open. Nothing still. What could it have been? My mind started inventing explanations. It definitely had 4 limbs. Maybe it was a big-ass spider who'd lost 4 of its legs somehow. That could explain the awkward movement. It was good enough for me. I was about to go back to bed when I thought, on a whim, to use my broom to poke behind the toilet, between the wall and the base of the seat. When I did, I hit something solid, and it scurried out. It looked like a tiny human. It was pale white, pale as a maggot, with dirty gray streaks running along its skin. It moved on all 4s with long, thin fingers that grasped the ground. Its skull was completely bald and had no eyes, and the skin looked like it had been torn away from the lower half of its face, leaving the exposed teeth and gums. It looked up at me, pointed its face in my general direction anyway, and then scurried, quick as fuck, up the side of the bath and down into the drain. It moved in quick bursts like a spider, and climbed straight up smooth surfaces like one too. After it disappeared down the drain, I just stood there frozen, broom handle still in my hand for a good 5 minutes. I was scared shitless. I slowly backed out of the bathroom and closed the door, and then stuffed a blanket in the crack between the floor and the door, fearing that it might come out. Then I sat in my bed and wondered what I could do. I mean, it wasn't like I could call the police, or even tell any of my friends. It's not like they'd believe me. So what did I do? I made a thread on X. This was quite a while ago, almost a year. He might even remember it. It wasn't anything special, and it didn't even get that many responses before falling off the boards. I guess people thought I was just joking, which, really, I would have thought the same thing. My thread, in retrospect, sounds exactly like the type of threads I hate. But aside from all the OP is a fag and sage responses, there was one other one. I've seen them too, man. Email me. Along with an email address that I'm not going to give out here. So I email this kid, right? Right away he responds and we start up a conversation in IRC. He introduces himself as John, and basically tells me a very similar story. One night, a few months ago, reading creepypasta, heard a noise, got up, and saw the small pale man. His was a bit bigger, he said. It was the size of a cat. But he also told me one other thing. That I'd be seeing more of them. He said that ever since he saw the first one, he's been seeing more and more of them. Out everywhere, even in the street during the day. They were everywhere, he said. And once you noticed the first one, it got a lot easier to see all the other ones. He had no idea what they were, and he hadn't figured out their behavior yet. He said that usually when he saw them or heard them in his own home, he was reading creepypasta. So they usually freaked him out something awful. But he had never actually seen them do anything terrible. Just scurry out of sight. He said some got pretty big, and not all of them looked exactly the same. I still didn't sleep that night. But over the next week, and those that followed, I found that I did get used to them. I did see more of them. I'd glimpse them out of the corner of my eye, or see the retreating rear end of one crawling into a gutter piece, or see their tiny faces staring out at the street from the sewers. Some, it seemed, weren't even trying to hide. I live in Providence, Rhode Island, which is a small city. On my way to work one day, I take the bus, I was looking out the window and saw a pretty large one, as large as a medium-sized dog, trotting along the sidewalk. People were just walking by it. Actually, I think that a lot of people saw it as a dog. One man stopped to scratch its head. I'd always email John and tell him about the appearances I saw. I even tried to catch them on camera, but they always heard the mechanical whirring and darted away before my camera could take a picture. I told myself I'd have to take a picture of one of the bigger, slower ones. But either way, as the weeks wore on, I became more and more used to them. Sure, they were creepy as shit, and I could never sit down on the toilet and enjoy a long crap anymore because I was paranoid as fuck that they'd climb up in the bowl and bite me on the asshole. But they weren't really doing anything harmful. They unnerved the fuck out of me, but so did big spiders. I could live with them. John called them gristers, because he said that they reminded him of the Grister meme on X for some reason. I'm pretty sure he meant grifter meme, but the name Grister stuck. I continued my exchanges with John, but I noticed he was becoming more and more tense. It was hard to tell over text, but really that was the only way to put it. I just figured that once the novelty of a shared experience had worn off, we didn't really have that much to talk about. John wasn't really my type. He was a steroid-pumping bodybuilder in southern Florida who lived with his mother. But we started discussing grister behavior, and he said that his were starting to act a bit more different than the ones I saw. He'd wake up at night and they'd be perched at the end of his bed, staring at him with their eyeless faces. They wouldn't scurry away anymore. He said that he woke up one time because one of them had actually started touching his face. That seemed unnerving. This whole time I had been putting out inquiries on the internet to see if anyone else had experienced the phenomenon. I couldn't be the only one. But no one came forward. On X, most of my threads about the subject got saged, so eventually I stopped asking. But I have an inquisitive mind. I wanted to know what these things did, what exactly they were. I even wanted to capture one. I left out food and mouse traps, but none of these things ever went for it. My cat would notice them though. She'd hiss at them, and even chase them a couple of times. All those times when I had seen her do this before, I would just assume she was being a dumbass cat, chasing at nothing. One night, I was walking home from work alone. I work at a call center for police charity, and my house is about 6 miles away. I'd had to stay late, so there was no bus to come pick me up, and I didn't really have all that many friends, so I had to walk. Anyway, I was walking past some old abandoned brick houses, creepy shit, let me tell you, when I heard some weird, low groan. That's when I happened to notice that there were a lot more gristers than usual here. They were mostly ignoring me, but they were scurrying in and around one particular brick house. The groaning sound seemed to be coming from the alley beside it. Now, a lot of gristers was creepy enough, even without that low groaning noise. What made me decide to investigate? I don't know. Morbid curiosity. I'm always looking for some creepy gore stuff to post on the boards. I thought that maybe the groaning was some kind of wounded animal. So I approached the side of the house, noting that the windows were boarded up. The groaning. I should have known then it was no animal. It was a low, creaking, gurgling sound. It didn't sound like any fucking animal I knew. So I snuck down the alley, and when I saw what was making the noise, I nearly pissed myself. It was a fat, humongous grister, at least 8 feet wide, completely unable to move, with the rolls of fat hanging down over its legs. It had no neck, just 14 chins leading up to its macabre exposed jaw. Dirty drool ran down its chin to cover its obscenely huge belly. Smaller gristers crawled in and out of the rolls of its fat. It rubbed itself with a pudgy claw, making that groaning, gurgling sound, which seemed almost sexual. It was terrible. I know it doesn't sound like it, and objectively, I can think that a fat cooing grister rubbing itself might sound pretty funny actually. But in the presence of that thing, all I felt was a sick revulsion and disgust. But I kept in mind one thing, that I had been looking for a picture of these things. So I busted out my camera phone and snapped a picture. I wish I hadn't. If I hadn't, I think maybe I could have lasted a little longer. The minute I snapped the picture, the thing stopped groaning and swiveled its head towards me. All the gristers did, in fact. They all started hissing and screaming at me, a horrible fucking sound, like rusty nails on a chalkboard. I was thoroughly freaked out. To put things mildly, I lost my shit. I ran out of there as fast as I could, ran all the way home. Gristers didn't seem so harmless to me now. That noise they had made was straight out of hell. I didn't feel safe with the lights off anymore. I flipped all the lights on, scaring the shit out of my napping cat. I slammed the bathroom door shut and stuffed a blanket around the cracks again. Then I sat down on my bed and looked at the picture I'd taken. There it was, clear as day. That huge grister. Looking at it made me feel sick. Of course, I was going to post it on X. I loaded it onto my computer and sent an email to John, with the excited subject, "Will you look at this fat fuck?" Then I immediately came to X and began typing up my thread, explaining myself, explaining the gristers, explaining the photograph. I was just getting ready to post, when John sent me a message. "Yo, don't show this shit to anyone." I stopped. I replied to John asking him what he was talking about. He told me. He said that he thought he had figured out what was making the gristers around him more hostile. He said that he thought that when they figured out that you could see them, they started getting more aggressive. He showed me scratches he had all down his arm from them clawing at him at night. He said that he'd seen a lot more of the bigger ones hanging around his house at night. They watched him through his windows. They knew. They knew he could see them, and they didn't like it. And now, I was pretty sure they knew I could see them too. So what did I do? In the end, I didn't post the picture. I wasn't too intimidated, but it probably saved a lot of you. I didn't want to trigger anyone else being able to see these guys if it had dangerous consequences down the road. I didn't notice any behavior change right away. For a while, in fact. For about 2 weeks, the Gristers acted just the same as they had before. I was beginning to think that John's problem was his own thing, and that the Gristers didn't know or didn't care that I could see them. And then things started happening so fast. I woke up one night and there were 4 of them, just perched around my bed staring at me. I freaked the fuck out and swept them away, and they just hissed that terrible noise at me and ran away. I emailed this to John, who I hadn't talked to otherwise. He didn't respond. We hadn't talked since I told him about the picture, and even rarely before then. After 2 days, during which the Gristers began touching me in my sleep, I got an answer. John was dead. His brother had the password to his email and was letting all his internet acquaintances know. He had committed suicide. He sliced open his wrists in the bathtub. John didn't seem like the type to commit suicide to me. Had things with the Gristers really gotten that bad that they drove him to that? We didn't really know each other very well, but he hadn't mentioned anything to me. His brother said that he hadn't left a note. I gave him my condolences. Now I had no one to talk about this. I started looking online for more references or anything. All the while, the Gristers were getting more and more aggressive. I'd look over my shoulder, and there would be 1 or 2 on the windowsill, just staring at me. One time, I had opened the door to my apartment. I live on the 3rd floor, and there was one about the size of a large dog staggering around the bottom of the stairwell, pale face flashing in and out of the darkness, baring its teeth in a growl at me. Pale limbs flashing as it bounded up the stairs. I slammed the door shut. I didn't go to work that day. Then I saw it on the news. That house. The house that I had seen the fat-ass Grister at. I would have skipped right past the news story had I not seen a picture of the house. The article was titled, 8 Found Dead, 3 Alive, in Rape Dungeon Raid. Apparently some sick fuck had been using the basement of one of those abandoned houses as a place to keep women prisoner and kill them when they felt like it. It was a terrible fucking story, but one of the things one of the survivors said really struck me. We were just so terrified all the time. We never knew when he was going to come in and decide to kill one of us. When he was going to really hurt us while raping us. We were just so terrified all the time. Terrified all the time. And Gristers had been all over that place. And when I first saw one, I had been reading creepypasta, and I was pretty freaked out. Same for John. Were these things drawn to fear? Then I read that 2 of the 3 survivors were being sent to a mental hospital for hallucinations. Did they see the Gristers? I stopped sleeping. I didn't want to wake up to those things staring at me. I stopped eating too. Whenever I wasn't at work, which happened to be more and more often, as I would call in whenever I would see a Grister bigger than a cat sniffing around my building for me. I was locked in my room, trying to hunt for information on the internet about these things. I just couldn't find anyone who had actually seen them. The Gristers were getting more violent. They were starting to scratch and bite me in those few scant hours that I actually did nod off to sleep. I'd always freak out and sweep them away. But now, they just stay still and hiss at me. After about a week of this, I came home from work and found my cat dead. They had peeled off all the skin away from her skull, giving her a look of shock. I quit my job. I cried for days. I don't have many friends, and I really loved that cat. They're not stupid. They don't talk, and they act differently from us. But they do have intelligence. I went out for food last week. It was the last time I will ever go out. I was sitting at the downtown bus station, shivering, looking all around me for Gristers. When the bus approached, I got up to get on. Out of nowhere, a Grister the size of a normal human slammed into the back of the woman next to me and threw her in front of the bus. She had no chance. I saw her slide under the wheels of the bus, saw her blood and ruined organs squeezed out of her mouth, like toothpaste. Everyone freaked out and panicked. As people rushed to her aid, the Grister turned towards me and grinned. I dropped my groceries and screamed, running back to my house, sobbing all the way. They're toying with me. And that's when I finally realized that there wasn't anyone I could really talk to about the Gristers. How many times when people commit suicide do you hear it reported that they are suffering from hallucinations? Read the reports of people who have been in terrible, frightening situations, like that rape dungeon or a war. How many of them suffer from hallucinations? Sure, a lot of them are actual hallucinations, but some of them are Gristers. And eventually, they figure out you can see them, and they start fucking with you. And I don't think everyone who they kill is driven to suicide. I don't think John committed suicide. I think they're smart. I think they know how to make something look like a suicide. You'll hear about it sometimes. You'll read a report about how someone committed suicide, but something just isn't quite right about it. Like a man who went out and bought a new couch, and then cut his wrists on it. And I'm convinced there was nothing special about John and me. I don't think there's anything special about anyone who sees these things. I think you're just more likely to see them when you're really scared, since that's when they're drawn to you. I can hear them right now. It's about 3 a.m. It sounds like a really big one is outside of my apartment door. It sounds like it's trying to gnaw its way through the wood. And so, I'm taking the easy way out. I'd rather have a nice sharp knife slice my arms open than have my skin torn by those teeth. So please, this is my final warning to you. Stop reading creepypasta. Stop listening to creepypasta. I know you love it. I know you love frightening yourself, but you've got to stop. Every time you read it, every time you hear it, every time you get that feeling of dread in your stomach, you're drawing the Gristers to you. And if you don't stop reading, at least, please, never check out those sounds in the house when you do.